Nick Moran, welcome officially to the Let's Grab Coffee podcast. It's a pleasure having you on, my friend.
George, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. One podcaster to another. I have to up the ante now. And I was joking with you. I know we'll get into the intro a little bit here, but a lot of folks in Chicago know you as the general partner at New Ventures. In addition to that, they also know you as the founder and host of the Full Ratchet, which is a very successful podcast. You have over 100,000 active subscribers. What I'm upset about the most is that you beat me by 2 years on your launch date, because you launched this in 2014, and I thought I was early in the podcast.
You launched in 2016?
2016, my friend. Yeah.
No kidding. You were early. I mean, that was still early days.
I know.
Podcast.
Yeah, it's you probably got this too. Back then, before it was actually really referred to as podcast, people would be like, is this a morning talk show, George? Are you trying to be like a Jimmy Fallon? What's the get here?
100%.
Yeah, well,
folks and my friends didn't know what a podcast was when I launched. They were like, "Are you crazy?
Like, what are you doing?" Yeah, definitely got the same kind of vibes. Let me lay up your story real quick. Super excited to have you on. I genuinely mean it. I'm a big fan of yours in the Chicago business ecosystem for various reasons. What I love about your story is it is a story of outliers. And funny enough, that's sort of the tagline you use in your investing philosophy, because you're a guy that started his career as a developer, right? Sort of unorthodox in this case. You then moved to the M&A side, which is the holy grail of finance. And then you eventually become a product manager at Danaher, which a lot of folks know as a medical product manufacturer, obviously massive, massive company where you built one of the most successful analytical devices in the company's history, and now still being used globally to test drinking water compounds. You then completely make a pivot. You basically give up corporate. This was about 2013. And you're like, let's do something that's super easy, because why not? And let's start a venture fund in Chicago in 2013. And that takes us to today, fast forward, where about $100 million raised total across 3 funds. You've invested in many companies, too many to count. I literally had to scroll across your LinkedIn for like 5 minutes. It almost gave me carpal tunnel, man. I'm like, when does this page end on an investor and board members? Yeah, so you've invested in several companies, of course, with New Ventures, raised across the 3 funds about $100 million. And you're continuing to make the push in Chicago, which is why I'm really excited to have you on. Just wanted to lay you up and make sure people have the backdrop.
Well, this is strange for me. It's like the roles are reversed. I'm being interviewed.
Yeah. How does it feel? Is it
a lot of fun? Thanks for having me. I mean, it's been quite a journey and very fortunate. Got to pinch myself every day. Had our AGM last week, and it's always fun to kind of celebrate and express some gratitude for where things are at, and having a role in this ecosystem, because it's quite hard to break into.
Let me actually ask you, I wasn't planning on asking you this, but let me just ask you quickly about celebrating micro wins in the moment. It's funny, yesterday, one of our senior associates at our law firm became a partner, and I sort of bumped into him in the washroom, and we kind of joked about, because we did a quick toast to him, and champagne and congrats. And I'm like, Max, that's really exciting. Congrats on that. Like, how do you feel? He's like, you know what, dude? I mean, it's a good feeling, of course, but nothing really changed, and of course it's the cheesy thing of it's the journey, the process, not the end result. But analogous to you, I mean, how does it feel as a pinch me moment? You're on stage, you're looking at your LPs, you're seeing all the companies that you've invested in, this ecosystem you've built. Did you see this back then, more than 10 years ago? Did this make sense?
I mean, I think it was the dream back then. And what's the best part about it is when you get a community together that's taking a risk. It's like a outsider thesis. It's an outsider leader trying to find these outliers across the country. And to make a bet on something outside of central casting is a tough bet to make. Many years ago, I had Linda Leckman on the podcast, one of the most esteemed LPs in the industry. And he made bets on Union Square Ventures and Founder Group Fund Once. And he looked probably foolish for a long time until he looked brilliant, right? So it's really hard to make contrarian bets. It's a lot easier to get caught up in ZERP and pile money on the biggest funds like the Andreessens and the General Catalysts. It's easy to follow. It's harder to lead. And it's a unique pleasure to see these founders that have built these transformational businesses. I mean, we have a few that are trending toward billion-dollar valuations for the first time. And it's remarkable because these folks started with a blank sheet of paper outside of Silicon Valley. They didn't go to the right schools, and now they're hot commodities, right? And they've got all the tier ones at Series B, C, D reaching out to them. And so it's just really special seeing these people succeed.
Yeah, it's easy to follow, hard to lead. When you're a contrarian, though, how do you, I mean, looking back throughout your career, right? And whether that's investing in companies, you as an investor, launching the podcast, in corporate, think of everything in aggregate. When do you, in terms of like really listening to your intuition, your gut, when do you know when it makes sense to continue to lead versus when it makes sense to sort of cut the rope and know that things aren't going your way, if that makes sense? Because I'm sure founders have come to you in the past, they started a business, you've maybe invested pre-seed, and they're like, Nick, we're at this crossroads, and do we continue? Do we not? And I'm sure you've had this crossroad before, and it's a very tough, there's no business plan, there's no rubric. It's very much a situational, subjective kind of a visual.
I mean, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for anyone else. But for me, it's not a choice, right? If it's not a choice, you know the answer. And if the choice is to push forward and persevere and overcome whatever odds have been thrown against you or hardships you've encountered, if it's not a choice, then you proceed. And if you find yourself thinking maybe it's time to pack it up, that's okay. Like, we all have a professional journey, and not every endeavor that we take on is going to be our life's professional mission, right? They're all building blocks. Like, I started out as a dev, after that I went to Danaher and I had this incredible run there, incredible company. Like, if you know, Danaher is one of the greats. And I could have stayed there, but I didn't have a choice. Like, I knew in my heart of hearts, I had to leave. I had to start something. And so I went after it. And just because something doesn't work out, I've had many failures throughout my career that I can talk about. And they were all building blocks that helped me find the thing that I wanted to commit my professional life to. And I'm very grateful. At the time, I wasn't. When you got hardships, and when you get smacked in the face, and when you launch something that doesn't work, it's so tough. It's so hard. But that creates resilience. That creates clarity on where you should focus time and effort. And most people early in their career, in their 20s, not everyone's Zuckerberg finding or founding a blockbuster company when they're in college. It just does not happen that often. We're all on our own journeys. We're all on our own timelines. I didn't found NewStack until I was 32, I think. And that took a while to get going. So we all have our journey, and it's okay to endure those failures, I think, because they're all building blocks towards something else.
I love that message. I resonate very deeply, by the way. One thing I actually wanted to, it's a beautiful segue. This is why it's so smooth talking to a fellow podcaster, aside from great mic quality. You mentioned Danaher is such a, it's one of the greats. I was actually going to ask you about that because rarely do I see a VC investor / entrepreneur have in their LinkedIn bio tagline their alumni of the previous corporate they were at. You see that often, like ex-McKinsey, of course, ex-Bain, whatever, right? It's not uncommon, but specifically if you're on the corporate track, you keep it. If you're a VC / investor / founder, it's less common. What I really want to ask you there with that in mind is, why is actually having corporate experience important in a world where today people look at the 9 to 5, they look at large enterprise, large conglomerates with a negative eye?
That's a good question. Danaher's pretty unique, right? I got operating insight, but I also got a private equity playbook, right? It's not a well-held, kept secret that Danaher is a PE firm masquerading as a public conglomerate. Yeah. And they've got one of the best PE playbooks out there. I mean, many notable, even PE firms in Chicago, I won't name which, but like one of the fastest growing that the founder lives, pretty close to me. He adopted Danaher's playbook in building his firm. And so it gives you this rare insight into how to create value, how to capture value with PE, but then how to leverage systems to some benefit. And that's a huge gap in venture capital, right? The gates to getting in venture capital are the things you mentioned. Did you go to Stanford? Have you founded a company? Were you McKinsey, Bain, BCG, investment banking? And you don't get a lot of people in venture that are systematic, process-oriented, have good reporting, I talked to an LP the other day that said, I can't believe you're reporting, right? If you send out your quarterlies on the first of the month, every quarter, he's like, I have to beg most of my fund managers just to get data in reports. Like, they don't send me anything. And so there's like a style difference, I think. But it gave me this incredible playbook. I saw a data point the other day that Danaher has been the second best performing public stock behind Apple over the past 3 decades. And so it's just a juggernaut, and they're so dialed there into what they do. And I think ultimately I left because I was at a crossroads where I saw what PE is. And ultimately, private equity is a value extraction game. How do we find the ripest, biggest orange and squeeze every bit of juice out of the flesh, the rind, the skin, every little bit? I mean, that's what private equity is great at. And then they flip it. But I wanted to be on the value creation side, right? Start with a blank sheet of paper, an idea, a woman or her co-founder, a dog in a garage or a basement here in the Midwest. And how do you build something that's iconic? And that's where I wanted to spend my time. And that was kind of the impetus for my journey at NewSec.
And one thing I'll add to what you said, because you said it brilliantly, which is essentially what I took from your point is leveraging the institutionalized knowledge that a corporation could give you, whether that's how they do meetings, whether that's how they run a playbook for investing. I think if you can leverage that, awesome. The second piece I'll just add quickly is the network nodes that you have around it. I mean, if you think of, let's say, the firm I work for, right? We're about 7,000 people total globally. When I was at TSX, it was 1,500, right? If you think of the fact that, let's say you and I are colleagues, I'm at NewStack, right then and there, that's the icebreaker. You don't need anything else. Like, immediately we have a connection point, and immediately I have a partner, a colleague, a peer that I can lean on. And so if you multiply it in Danaher's case, I don't know their total employee count. I'm assuming it's quite significant. Right then and there, you can lean on individuals in different areas, different practice groups, divisions, that then they have their own relationships. They could be potential LPs, customers, suppliers, partners, to whatever you end up doing, in your case, launching a venture fund. And so thinking about it long-term is super important.
100%. And I think the most important point that you started the podcast off with is there's no one path to success or finding your purpose or finding what you should work on. So whether that's in corporate America or that's in banking or consulting, or many of the founders that we back that grew up in a vertical, right? Learning a domain. We just backed this incredible founder out of Denver that is building a new BDC technology for auto dealerships, right? Like, auto dealerships is not the most exciting category, but the leader in the space is worth over $1 billion, and it's built on 30-year-old legacy software. And so there's opportunity everywhere. And there are great people and great talent everywhere, hiding in corporate America, hiding in SMB verticals. And the key is, can you spot incredible talent, be up before others do? And that's kind of our whole system. Our whole system is based on finding value and finding winners in unexpected places.
Yeah. What is that? Walk me through that skill in venture. I mean, we're transitioning now to you as an investor. It very much reminds me of, you sometimes see these guys on the beach with metal detectors. And I never know if they're doing this as like a full-time job or if they're doing this for fun, just like as a passion project. But it's funny if you watch them, like they're enjoying, it seems. I mean, they're by the beach, they're walking in the sand. And once in a while it beeps and they get really excited and they sift through the sand in this filter. And once in a while, something will land, it'll stick. And when you sort of cobble it together, you might get something that has a lot of value. And in many ways, it's quite synonymous to, investing, where it's not laid out for you. It's tricky. You got to find the gems in the rough.
Well, and if you want to be a winner in any asset class, you got to find ARB and you got to find your source of edge. And early days when I got into venture and did what you're doing, interviewed a bunch of VCs, I realized there's this chronic illness that pervades the entire industry, which is called bright, shiny object syndrome. And it's very easy to find a central casting resume, Stanford educated, Menlo Park located, worked for Google, and they're building some bright, shiny object, right? And so we have this industry full of resume investors. We have an industry chasing bright, shiny objects, and it's not the bright, shiny object or the plan that creates great businesses. The founder is the quantum unit of success. And I see, candidly, I see $5 billion plus ideas in my inbox every week. People think they're high, like you can't find $1 billion plus. They're everywhere. Like the ideas are pervasive and they're great, but you can't, the challenge is how do you find the founder that's going to be the next Bezos, that's going to be the next Jensen, that's going to be the next Jobs. Those are hard to find. And so, if you develop a mechanism to identify people that have greatness built in them, I think that that's a persistent thesis that can perform over multiple vintages and over many decades. Whereas most theses are thin, they're fragile, they're based on hype, they're based on a trend of the moment, maybe they're based on a sector. And while those things are hot at various times, a thesis built on that will come and go. How do you find an absolute, something immutable, something that regardless of circumstance, the environment we live in, the technology trends will persist for decades on end? And so that's why we've centered on this thesis of finding the extraordinary and trying to identify those folks early on.
Yeah, and you've said in the past, I've heard you say, especially at the pre-seed and seed level, 80% of your decisions stem from the team.
That's right.
What I like about your response and mindset and framework is the fact that you actually have a process around this, because everybody has talked to the investor that says, oh, we completely only invest in teams, right? Like that's what we look for. And you're like, well, What does that even mean? I mean, what can you break that down for me? And what I like about what you've done is you rate founders, I believe, I don't know if you still do this, but on 6 dimensions. I have them in front of me, but maybe we'll walk through them in case people don't know. I thought this was really cool. So I kind of want you to break it down and tell me more so from the thousands of pitch decks, thousands of podcast episodes, thousands of founder interviews. Which one of these dimensions stand out the most?
They're all important. There are 6 dimensions. It's tenacity, resilience, obsession, magnetism, attention to detail, and learning appetite.
A+,
VCs will talk about agility, but it's really appetite we're after. Those are the people that, like, you want to invest in people that have sharp slopes, but are not strong dots. And what I mean by that is they grow and they learn at a rapid rate, as opposed to, being a well-educated, well-credentialed person that's kind of going to top out. And we see this in sports all the time, right? The top 10 draft picks, you look 3 years later, the football draft picks, those top 10 had 7 notable flameouts, 5 to 7. And it was actually, Tom Brady at number 60 something that ends up becoming the greatest of all time. Totally overlooked, one of the final picks in the draft. So we see this present in so many circumstances. Academia, universities are historically terrible at selecting talent. If you look at their success rates of graduation, if you look at their success rates of donors, graduates that end up giving back, it's very, very low. And so, we have a chronic issue in society on how do you spot good talent, how do you select for it. And we were able to isolate within the entrepreneurship domain, these are the 6 characteristics that present most often in the best of the best. So if you study the best, the Rockefellers, the Jobs, the Bezos, you will see certain characteristics continually show up. And so the question for us became, all right, if you know what characteristics you're looking for, how do you test for that? What behaviors will be demonstrated that map to those characteristics? And that's what kind of informs and developed our whole model around mindset. We call it the WHO framework. But we have very specific behaviors we look for. And guess what? You see those behaviors in all the best founders. In our portfolio, they're very different people. If you gave them the Myers-Briggs or the Hogan or the Enneagram, they would be wildly different on a psychographic profiling exercise. But behaviorally, as entrepreneurs, they all exhibit the same sort of behaviors. So if you distill down those behaviors, then you can observe for them and you can test them. And that's been our edge. I mean, our graduation rates from pre-seed to seed to A are north of 80%. I think the average in the industry is right now it's 13 to 14%.
Wow.
And so, VCs are asking me all the time, how the heck are you finding these outsiders in Nowheresville and do a pre-seed with zero revenue and graduate 85% of them. And it's all this Who framework, 100%.
Yeah, well, it's also a big part of it. It lends very well to another big philosophy of yours, which is that venture is an access class, not a skill class. And it's this big debate, right? And it in a weird way, it ties very well into what you were saying before, right? It's like the testing you were talking about. How many amazingly smart, talented, skilled, intelligent people fail standard testing exams? And you sort of then fail to realize who's actually, because then it's like a factory. There's a bias in that, and there's a rigid process that I'm selecting and looking for XYZ person, and everybody who doesn't subscribe to it or does well, I'm completely blocking and putting to the side. So there is an inherent bias in that, and it's very structural. But for you sort of recognizing that, and it's much more access related than it is skill related, which is the issue that you're tackling.
That's right. I mean, we talk about this a lot. Like, is the game access or is it about selection? Historically, it's been about access. Very few people could raise money. They had to be incredibly well educated and incredible and a part of the right circles, in the right networks, connected with the ivory tower of VCs in Silicon Valley. But it's becoming more meritocratic over time, right? People that otherwise could not have gotten access, could not have raised money, are raising based on merit. And we see that changing over time. Josh Koppelman is famous for talking about the difference between cartographers and navigators. So what you'll find is a lot of folks that have had tremendous success in education, for instance, are incredible navigators, right? If you give them a map and tell them, this is how you succeed in academia, they can navigate it perfectly. They can get the A's, they can go to Stanford, they can go to Harvard, they can get their master's or PhD. But what Josh is looking for and what we're looking for at NewStack are cartographers. So these are people that resist a lot of navigation because they find flaws. We're not going to the right destination. I don't care about navigating this perfectly because I disagree with the premise. And so the best entrepreneurs often are these cartographers. They draw their own maps, right? They have their own objectives for life. What winning looks like for them looks different than most people that are handed a map. And so, that's part of our thesis. And we're looking for these people that have not had access, that come from places outside the valley. And maybe they went to good schools, but they didn't go to the Ivies. And they write their own maps. And when you find them, it's just, it's a joy to kind of hitch your dinghy to their ship.
Yeah, the thing that stood out a little bit more to me too, as an immigrant born and raised in the Middle East, immigrated to Canada, and then just seeing kind of the struggle of the immigration journey and kind of the expat journey, I call it the immigrant roadshow, is also the lack of legacy access. It's so funny, like when sometimes you hear folks tell founders, especially for their pre-seed, family, this family and friends round, the F&F round. And most immigrant founders will look at that and just like hysterically laugh. They're like, family, friend, what the hell are you talking about? Like, you want me to go to my cousin who barely has like 2 nickels to spare, to raise 10,000, 50,000 from this individual, or my parents whose life saving, like it's the access then segregates very quickly and it doesn't make it inclusive, and then it's like, well, rely on grants for underrepresented founders, which is a shitty, like they're very important obviously in the ecosystem, but if that's the only resource they have, it's not a level playing field. It's not.
It never has been. And the good byproduct of that is it creates very resilient, tough people.
Yes.
That learn how to be creative, right? Like ingenuity is one of our cultural principles at the firm. Like people just have this ridiculous level of ingenuity. They learn at a more rapid rate, to the point around slopes before. And, if you can ultimately unlock access, because many people can't build on nothing. So they will have to raise a pre-seed or seed round if they want to build a multi-billion-dollar company. Not in all cases, but in many. Hopefully we can find those folks. And if you're listening and you're one of them, please reach out to George or myself. I'd love to connect.
Yeah, we'll definitely help out. In terms of the criteria or focus areas, this is another big, it's not a debate, but it's so many different funds have different strategies. You have some that are extremely specialized. We only do Chicago, we only do tech, we only do Midwest, we only do healthcare, right? The sort of specialist generalist debate. And this is funny because it's a debate not just for investors and funds, but in your careers. Should I be a generalist? Should I be a specialist? It's an evolving, ever evolving sort of talking point. You've written about this. You frame it as a specialist trap, and that especially sector VCs often crush fund one and then usually fall off a cliff. And that's because this notion of specialization turns into a liability. Walk me through that. I'm assuming it's because you dwindle the amount of opportunities on yourself. Is that partly why? Like, what is the reasoning behind that?
Well, I should caveat this whole thing by saying early in one's career, as a human, as an individual, everyone should think about a specialty, and they should continually niche down their specialty until they find something they can be the greatest in, or the most knowledgeable, at least, about. So let's say you're interested in gaming, but the gaming sector is well covered with experts, right? You could be a specialist in mobile gaming or a certain aspect of mobile gaming, or maybe it's this in-person competitive tournament gaming. So young people in their career have the benefit of time, and they can specialize to a degree where they become the go-to resource for whatever their domain is. And I encourage that. I think everyone should start that way. And then over time, I think the goal should be to become well-rounded. Like, a lot of people say, focus on your strengths, lean into your strengths. And while that's good early in your career, you can't elevate to great leadership levels without addressing some weaknesses. I would not be a venture capitalist today if I just relied on my strengths, right? I was afraid to speak in public, in front of people, and I leaned into podcasting as a way to address that fear and develop my ability to tell a story, talk with people, present in front of an audience. And I would not have an opportunity to run this VC firm unless I had addressed some notable weaknesses. But back to your point around specialization, the problem with specialization for a VC fund is, number one, a lot of these specialties are thin or fragile, as I mentioned before. So they're temporary. There's going to be a window of time where you can access arbitrage within a specialty. But as soon as it becomes known, let's say you were early to fintech, right? My buddy, I have many buddies, I won't name names, but they're specialists in fintech. The earliest specialists in fintech had incredible funds, incredible returns. And guess what happened? As soon as fintech became a hot sector, now there's, I think, over 60 funds at seed specializing just in fintech. There's another probably 40 specialists in fintech at Series A. And then it becomes crowded. So at the end of the day, economics do make sense. Like, if we've all taken our economics classes, supply and demand, if there's too much supply side of capital, like we saw during the ZERP era, it arbs out all the returns. And that's what happens with a lot of these specialties is, as soon as they get gravity, as soon as they have success, that gravity becomes a magnetic force for capital. Capital rushes in. It's easy to raise a fund around one of these hypey areas. And then supply side of capital is too high and all the returns are arbed out. And so my belief is you should be flexible. You should be a generalist and you should move to where the opportunities are at, right? So instead of getting so hung up and so over-indexed on Web3, 4 years ago, you kind of have to move with the climate and find that window of arb. What is the most underappreciated area right now that's going to be the hottest area in 3 to 5 years? And that's what we invest in today, which is application layer AI and vertical AI. It's, at a trough right now. All the money is flooding into infra and the model layer. None of that money is hitting the application layer for vertical AI. And we'll see that in 3 to 5 years, it's going to get really crowded. But right now, it could be the best vintage of my career because no one's focused on it, especially at pre-seed. So it's a great opportunity to find remarkable founders, lead those deals, because a lot of people are running away from outsiders. They're running away from application layer vertical AI. And it's the best window of opportunity right now.
Can you give us an example, just to drill down what that actually looks like? Application layer.
Yeah. So when you think infrastructure AI, think NVIDIA, right? They're making chips or data centers, right? When you think model layer AI, think OpenAI or Anthropic. They're building these huge, massive models that are trained mostly on public data, right? And because of that, it's a capital aggregation game, right? These models are racing to aggregate money and outspend the other guy or gal to improve their model, right? But those two prior layers, they're only useful for use cases and application layer AI. That's what's actually using the tools, right? The tools exist, but they need to be deployed for utility, productive use. So that's the application layer. So think, you using ChatGPT, on your computer, that's application, that's a use case for a specific purpose. Maybe you're planning a trip or a vacation, right, as a consumer. But there's many applications within a vertical. So for instance, we're backing a founder now that built a business with software that did mortgage brokerage processing, right? It's a heavy, sticky, boring, sort of old school industry, right? Like the people in that industry don't sound like you, George, like a little different than us, right? But it's this like thing that needs to be done. And there's a lot of tribal knowledge, and finding people that actually know how to process these mortgages is, it's kind of a dying breed. And this founder had built a software company with something called RPA, robotic process automation, sold the business in 18 months to Remax for a great outcome. He had like this great outcome. Well, he's outlasted his non-compete, and he realizes with AI, all those little blocks of use cases and workflows that were so hard to build with software alone, he can build at a much more productive pace and with much more utility with AI. So, we often talk about the model layer companies, but those are being built so that people can apply those things for good use in business, consumer applications, and that will be the next great frontier for AI.
How are you usually spotting these opportunities? Because you're saying spotting these new application layers, new opportunities. How do you stay ahead of it? Like, what is that model for you?
From a thesis standpoint or the actual companies?
Thesis, market.
I think, you got to read, you got to study. I interview a lot of people, so I hear a lot of things. And the central source of value within AI is data. Without data, AI models are worthless. They can do nothing, right? And the huge model layer companies are largely training on public data. So data that's accessible on the internet and a variety of public places, things they can scrape and pick up. You know what the biggest data source is, though? That's hiding, that is inaccessible. It's data within companies, right? Think about your law firm. You have tremendous amounts of contracts and data, stuff that's not publicly available on the internet, right? But if you had an incredible AI tool that had access to every contract that's ever been closed, right, at the firm, it can train on all those things, and it can create, an auto-generated contract that someone needs to review and update and edit, but can speed up a lot of time and a lot of, manual hourly work. And so data is the next frontier for AI. AI is only as powerful as the data it's being trained on. And most of the data is completely inaccessible because it's buried within companies, like this mortgage brokerage processing business I mentioned. Like that's not public data. But if you find the right AI tool that provides enough value and enough utility, it's being trained on longitudinal data over time. You can do advanced customer segmentation with that. You can improve workflows. And some huge model company like OpenAI can't come in and build a better version of your product because they don't have access to that longitudinal data. They haven't gone through all those repetitions of improvement, and they don't understand the industry and the workflows and the context to the degree that a domain-specific AI company will.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not an easy thing to do that, though, to be honest, like to stay ahead of it. And one of the things that comes to mind is, what sort of habits do you instill in your daily, Nick, that allows you to learn? Because I know one of those, I don't know if you call it whether it's an application layer or a vertical, but I know you're certainly bullish on the healthcare system, the US healthcare system. You've mentioned in the past it's chronically innovated. But as someone who, let's say, doesn't have a healthcare background, I don't have a healthcare background, how do you study it? How do you learn it to be proficient enough to then go and spot these opportunities? Because you talked about how you spot. How do you learn so that you understand it enough so that you're able to invest?
It's a good question.
I'm glad I'm asking good questions, by the way. I was really nervous about this. I'm like, if Nick doesn't like my questions.
I mean, it's tricky to answer because there's something called the curse of knowledge. So I can pretend to know nothing about healthcare, and I know 1% about healthcare versus my founders that are working in healthcare. But the reality is, I've looked at enough deals, and I worked in healthcare at one point. And so I understand the stakeholders. I understand a little bit about why the system is broken in healthcare. And it's mostly because of the employer paid model in the States. And that's kind of what perverts a lot of the incentives in healthcare. But at a 30,000 foot level, I also know that data in healthcare is tremendously valuable, right? If you know the way that certain populations, certain ages react to different drugs, if you know, proclivities of certain populations, you can create a better care plan. And so what I try and do in my job is respect my own ignorance and find founders that have a paintbrush and have an ability to articulate exactly why something works a certain way, why it's broken. And if you've heard of the Feynman method, I think it's, can you describe something that like a 10 or a 12-year-old would understand? Like everyone needs that ability in startups, whether you're recruiting investors, recruiting talent, closing key customers. Customers don't want to hear about the nuances of your fancy AI model. They want the AI model to disappear. Like they want it to be invisible. They just want things to work, right? Most people that sit at a desk every day and make $40,000 a year, they don't want to be learning crazy tools and like trying to advance in every way. They just want things to work better, more efficient, easier. Like the stuff shows up on time. I'm getting better stuff. Customers are served in a better way. So they want all this stuff to be invisible. And if you keep that in mind, like we look for founders that can explain a very complicated system in a way that makes sense. I always want to be much more ignorant than the founder about their space. If I know more than a founder about their space, that's a signal to me that it's the wrong investment, right? Because they're eating, sleeping, breathing it every day. When they get up in the morning, take a shower, walk the dog, go for a run, they're driving to work, they are obsessing about their industry and they know way more nuances about it than I do. Just like I know more nuance about VC than they do, because I've been interviewing people for 12 years, about it. And so that's kind of the criteria. That's the benchmark. Do you have deep obsession? Do you understand your industry in a way that, extends far beyond what I ever could?
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a great way to summarize it. Look, you've been in Chicago since 2013 as a VC, as part of the ecosystem. You've built a great marketplace. You've certainly expanded the ecosystem, I'd say, and you've been such a great contributor to it. When you think back to 2013, when you first kind of stepped foot in this ecosystem versus what you see now, even like the West Loop where I'm based, and you see kind of just the physical construction, the companies around here, the innovation, are you happy? Is it good progress? And what improvements do we still need to make in the local business ecosystem?
I'm really pleased with how far we've come, but I think we have a long way to go. I think barriers to capital have come down substantially. Back in 2013, it's kind of funny. Back in 2013, I started this breakfast for VC founding partners with a guy named Jeff Maders at Network Ventures. And that first breakfast, yeah, he's great. That first breakfast, there were 5 of us. It was like me, Victor Gutwine, Jonathan Ellis, Constance, and Jeff. Now that breakfast, there's I think 57 people invited to us, and it's all founding partners of venture. And so the industry has changed a lot. There are many more funds in Chicago. There are many more funds in the Midwest. This access issue we talked about before is coming down. There's more access to capital. I would like to see, more startups being founded in Chicago. I think I can do more. I think we all can do more to encourage that to happen. Having successes in the ecosystem always creates, this byproduct of new founders that saw it done a certain way and they want to go build something of their own. And so, yes, I would love to see more successes on the startup front. I'd love to see more activity, but the ecosystem has developed significantly. Like it is in no way comparable to what it was 10, 12 years ago.
Well, and very collaborative too. I think that's the one thing, as someone who, moved here 7 years ago from Canada and knew absolutely no one other than my then girlfriend, now wife. She was literally like my only contact in Chicago. And how welcoming, the ecosystem has been for someone to be an outsider, quote unquote, to not, quote unquote, be an American and, come here and really feel like a true Chicagoan, be immersed, have doors open, people taking coffees and calls and humoring me for the things that I'm trying to accomplish and supporting my efforts so that I can support theirs is something that not every city, to be honest, has.
I agree. It's a very friendly climate. Like, people are very collaborative. It's a wonderful ecosystem to be a part of.
Let's end. I know we're almost up on time. Full Ratchet. I love the podcast, by the way. I am a fan. You've recorded many episodes. You're leveraging it, as do I, with Let's Grab Coffee. It makes, it's such an important lever. It's so beneficial to the ecosystem, and it's very helpful to your portcos too, as like a marketing advantage, right? Whether it's to your portfolio companies, to your investors, you can really benefit from using it as like a marketing platform for a lot of these companies. And it's a voice. You're allowing them to get insight, right? So many people use it for, like who's Nick behind the scenes? And if I want to join Nick's team, who is he as a leader? I think that's why podcasts are very beneficial. They give you a glimpse, insight into the person behind, the title. Having done it for so long, I just want to talk to you very quickly and end on consistency, perseverance, biting down on the mouth guard and pushing when you don't see success, you don't see metrics, you don't see progress, whether that's with a podcast venture. It's a theme that follows you around a lot. What have those tenets taught you in your career and in your life?
I mean, it was tough early days, George. I mean, I left a well-paid job to start, this journey of New Stack and TFR. And I didn't pay myself for 5 years. I didn't have a paycheck for 5 years. As soon as we started getting sponsors for the show, I hired an incredible assistant to help me run that thing. Because, it's no joke running a podcast. Even today, I mean, back then you needed a whole studio and had to do all your own editing and publishing, and it was kind of a nightmare. Now we have, software like Riverside, but it helps. So that was a long journey, right? And my wife said it when I launched the podcast. I said, I think this is the key that can like unlock a great network and some deal flow. And she said, it's going to take a lot longer than you think. And she was right. But if you stick with, just like a startup, you're going to go through these really hard years and ups and downs. And if you stick with it and you believe in it, you'll get to the other side. And now look at it, like, top 0.5% global audience, 4 million listeners. 4 of our top 5 deals closed at New Stack. 4 of our top 5 were listeners that reached out to me cold. And now they've become these tremendous businesses. And it's helped us build this follow-on network.
LP.
Right? So
right.
LPs. I mean, most founders come to us. I say, why did you come to me? And it's like, well, Nick, more founding partners and general partners in Silicon Valley than just about anyone. Maybe you and Harry Stebbings. And so when they need that Series A or Series B, and they're building in Nashville or Mexico City, they need a gatekeeper like me or like you that knows a ton of decision makers in venture. And that's been transformational for us, for our graduation rates, for our founders. And so, it's hard to stick with something that takes a long time, but anything that's great should be measured in decades, not in years. And so we all have to remember that and focus on what gives us value, what gives us energy. And you can see small wins along the way.
Love it. What a beautiful way to end. Nick Moran, we finally made it happen. Thank you, my friend. Again, I knew this would be a tremendous episode, and just grateful for your time, all that you do here in Chicago. I know you have many fans, but, happy to call myself one of them.
Likewise, George. Love what you're doing. Keep it up with the podcast and look forward to working with you more.